Hello and welcome to The Window. My name is Harry Durham. Every day of the transfer window, we'll keep you up to date with all of the deals, the movers and shakers in the Premier League. Joining me today to discuss the biggest transfer stories of the day is talkSPORT transfer expert Ben Jacobs, coming from Philadelphia and the Club World Cup. Let's kick off with Benjamin Šeško, and it's been reported in Bild today that he has agreed personal terms to join Arsenal. What do you make of that? Is it finally getting over the line? Because, you know, it's dominated so many transfer windows now.
Yeah, we know that Benjamin Šeško a year ago wanted to join Arsenal. There were three Premier League clubs, Arsenal, Chelsea and Manchester United. And Šeško picked Arsenal, but then had to make a secondary decision. Was he going to move in 2024 or wait a year? And he decided it was better for his development to stay at Leipzig. Arsenal then went back to Leipzig in January to see whether anything mid-season was possible. And the answer was no. And now it's no surprise that Arsenal are revisiting this transfer, but Viktor Gyökeres is there as well. It's been described to me that unlike Edu, who was meticulous and took a single target and tried very hard to diligently and discreetly get it over the line, but with new sporting director Andrea Berta, he likes to lay his clothes out before the party, try on each outfit, and then decide what he's going to walk out wearing. And this is why we're seeing both Viktor Gyökeres and Benjamin Šeško advancing. And it's very helpful sometimes in a transfer to agree terms with the player, or alternatively a fee, and then go back to your other target and do the same, because you can leverage them against each other. And that kind of maverick approach is how Berta sometimes works. So we're in a situation where Arsenal are proceeding with both Benjamin Šeško and Viktor Gyökeres. It's not thought that each could arrive, so it's one or the other. With Benjamin Šeško, terms were never an issue, so it's no surprise that Bild are reporting that the player's keen on joining, and the financials are a lot cheaper than Gyökeres for sure, in terms of the wage anyway, and the agent fees, I'm led to believe too. But the key thing for Šeško is he has this variable release clause that has been based on his performance last season, and the overall cost, if you're going to trigger the clause, is around 80 million euros, and not with particularly, I'm told, preferable payment terms. So Arsenal are looking to do Šeško, if they proceed, for more like 70 million euros. And they're also hoping, if they go down the Gyökeres route, that that's a 70 million euros deal. So it feels pretty clear at the moment what Arsenal are doing. One, they assessed Alexander Isak. They don't think he's genuinely available. They've moved on, although Liverpool might not, by the way. So let's kind of see how that develops. Two, they've made a consideration between Šeško and Gyökeres. And now three, before they bid for either, they're determining what the actual final number will be. Šeško, they would do for around 70 million euros. Gyökeres believes that he's allowed to leave in this kind of verbal pact also for 70 million euros, but Sporting at the moment are providing some obstacles to that, so we'll have to wait and see what the final price might be there. And when we get, I think, into late June, or very possibly the next financial year, and in the first week of July, that's when I really think Arsenal and their window and their search for a striker will really get going.
Time frame wise, when can Arsenal fans probably expect an announcement and see Benjamin Šeško in an Arsenal shirt?
Well, I don't think Arsenal feel they're being slow. That's the first thing to say. People would love a timeline. They'd love a Liverpool-type swoop. They'd love Man City business. And Chelsea have been active, obviously, in bringing in Delap and bidding for Jamie Gittins, and those talks are still ongoing. But remember, Chelsea and Manchester City are in the Club World Cup, and for Liverpool, they had to move fast on Florian Wirtz simply because Bayern were really pushing, and the Wirtz family had made it clear to all suitors that he wanted to decide where he was going before his holiday and finalise the move after it. With Jeremy Frimpong, there was a release clause. With Milos Kirkos, he's only been speaking to one club, and that's Liverpool. But I think Arsenal realise that the market's been a bit skewed by this 1st to 10th of June period. And actually their perspective is that they want to get going in July. That's beneficial for the financial year. So I don't think they feel that things are taking painstakingly long, but I understand why fans may, because they're comparing the volume of Arsenal business to what ultimately the other clubs I mentioned are doing. But let's not forget that Arsenal have got Martin Zubimendi over the line, still expected to be formalised. Nobody has come in for Šeško or Gyökeres to suggest that whichever one Arsenal go for, they're going to get hijacked at this stage. We know Gyökeres is a slightly more competitive race, though, than for Šeško. The left winger situation, Arsenal have ruled out Nico Williams because the overall cost of the deal. It's Barcelona that are really pushing there. You've got Bayern in the mix, and Athletic Bilbao would love to offer Williams a new contract and have already started those talks, as I revealed a couple of weeks ago. So sometimes I think people assume when your club does nothing, they're being slow. But you've got to look at these two things. One, Arsenal are not that concerned by the 1st of 10th window, whereas other clubs needed to move. Two, they've got a new sporting director. And ultimately, the financial year is probably impacting when they want to do these deals as well. So I repeat what I said before. I think Arsenal's summer is really going to start picking up speed come the 1st of July. And I tell you something, if you look at Liverpool's spend now and you go to the end of the window and we work out what Arsenal might spend, I'm not sure that Liverpool's total spend and Arsenal's total spend in terms of numbers come the end of the window, even though there appears a gulf now, will actually be that different.
Ben, this side of the Atlantic, there's been reports that Marcus Rashford could swap Manchester for London with a move to Spurs. The new era at Tottenham, Thomas Frank coming into the football club, and potentially a permanent fresh move for Marcus Rashford from Manchester United. Has this story actually got any legs, and could we actually see Marcus Rashford head to North London?
Well, Marcus Rashford wants Barcelona. It's as simple as that. But obviously, if Barcelona proceed with Nico Williams, then he may not get Barcelona. In fact, he almost certainly won't. So the Rashford camp have been holding talks with Barcelona. It's a 40 million outlay. Manchester United are clear at the moment, as you'd expect this early in the window. They're not prepared to do a loan for Marcus Rashford. Now, if we get later in the window and they don't find a solution, maybe that changes. But right now, Manchester United are in a position of strength. He's done well at Aston Villa, and therefore it's a £40 million deal. And Barcelona are not prepared to do that. It's more likely at this stage they find a way to trigger the €58 million release clause of Nico Williams. And that means no Marcus Rashford and also no Luis Diaz. So Rashford may have to rethink his position because he was all in on Barcelona a couple of weeks ago. Villa without Champions League football and their PSR position can't do Rashford. And with Tottenham, I'm not aware of anything advanced at the moment. I'd say two things. The first is that Rashford would prefer to join a club with Champions League football, which means that even if Villa came back in, it's perhaps unlikely that he would agree to that. And then the second thing in all of this is the wage. And from Tottenham's point of view, they won't be paying Marcus Rashford what he's on at the moment at Manchester United if they decided to go in that direction. And I'm not aware that Rashford is now particularly high in their thinking despite links. What's true is that Tottenham may add another left-sided attacker, even though Matis Tel has signed permanently. And that calls into question, to an extent, the future of Son, but later in the window, because our expectation is that he goes off on the pre-season tour, he arrives in South Korea, he plays against Newcastle where he's contractually obligated to be on the field, and then later in the window we see a situation where after Son has spoken to Thomas Frank and understood if another left-sided attacker is coming in, that's when his future is clear. But there's firm interest from Saudi Arabia in Son, as we broke on talkSPORT yesterday. So keep an eye on that left-hand side for Spurs, but it's not as big a priority as the right. And I'm not at this point aware of anything advancing between Spurs and Rashford. Full respect, of course, for other reporting, but I just don't have that information my end at the moment. And Tottenham are really looking at that right side first. And we know that Brian Mbeumo is one name, and there's the Thomas Frank factor. But Manchester United is still confident that the player hasn't changed his mind. He wants Manchester United. So if there's a fee agreed between Brentford and Manchester United and Brentford and Tottenham for Mbeumo, in other words, it comes down to a straight choice, Manchester United still believe the player, without hesitation, will still pick Manchester United. You've got Antoine Semenyo, who would cost more than Tottenham paid for Dominic Solanke to Bournemouth. They would like a club record sale if he's to go. And Tyler Dibbling is still there as well as a right-sided attacker or winger. And Thomas Frank likes the idea that that right-sided player can also move into more central areas. So nothing advancing at this point, to my knowledge anyway, between Rashford and Spurs. What's true is that a couple of years ago, Tottenham considered Rashford when the price was about 45 million. Now it's 40 million, but you've got that very high wage. And I don't think that's a deal that Tottenham would even consider, or a lot of these other Premier League clubs, to be fair to, unless Rashford takes a significant pay cut. So it's one to watch, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Rashford situation drags on a little bit, because there's several complications unless Manchester United bend on that structure and are prepared to do a loan with an option again.
We're hearing that Juventus striker Dusan Vlovic would like a move to Manchester United from Juventus. Then it's been reported that AC Milan are also interested in signing him too. What's the most likely destination for Vlovic? Is it the Premier League with Manchester United, or moving to Milan from Turin?
Yeah, my information is that Manchester United have other priorities, but they're kind of running a big list of strikers at the moment internally. So it's normal that these kind of rumours or names come out, simply because it's still an internal process at Manchester United. The focus is on Mbeumo, and he can lead the line, but if he arrives, Manchester United will still look for another 9. But they've gone all in on Liam Delap. And actually, had they qualified for the Champions League by beating Spurs in the Europa League final, they might have got Delap, because at one point he was leaning quite heavily to going back to the Northwest. But European football so important to Delap, because Thomas Tuchel has told him if he plays regularly at the highest level, he stands a very strong chance of making the 2026 World Cup squad. And now even more so, because he's at the Club World Cup with Chelsea and not having the opportunity to impress directly with the under-21s at the Euros. That Champions League football specifically this season is big for Delap. And that's ultimately why Manchester United lost the race, in addition to the fact that Chelsea just made a very strong pitch in both football and financial terms. And Enzo Maresca and Joe Shields both know Delap well. So it was always going to be between Manchester United and Chelsea. But Manchester United would have loved the ability to get Cunha Delap in, and then they could have calmed a little bit, focused on outgoings, got through the end of this financial year and worked out the situation. Now they're having to push still for both Mbeumo and draw up a list of number 9s. And this maybe is where all the names are coming from. There's been concerns from a number of Premier League clubs over Vlovic, Arsenal in particular, and Chelsea as well, who never advanced anything, about Vlovic and specifically a chronic groin injury. And clubs want to be aware of whether or not they feel, should he come to the Premier League at this pace and physicality, whether he's going to be able to stay fit. And I think Manchester United at this stage are not advancing on Vlovic. There are other targets on their list. It's not true Victor Gyökeres has rejected Manchester United. He would welcome a bid from Arsenal. And if Arsenal and Manchester United bid, he may well pick Arsenal, but don't rule out the Ruben Amorim factor. Gyökeres is also open to Manchester United. So if we see a scenario where Arsenal do Šeško, Manchester United still might be in for Gyökeres. It is true that they've made outreach for Hugo Ekitike as well. Frankfurt love the idea of such outreach because they want a bidding war. We've heard Chelsea, who do hold an interest, but it's never been advanced to my knowledge, despite the fact that we've heard reports that a deal was imminent there from the German media, and the same can be said for Liverpool as well. So I think you've got a scenario where Chelsea, Manchester United and Liverpool are all looking at Ekitike, and it suits Frankfurt because they want that 100 million euros. Manchester United are not going to do the deal for Hugo Ekitike unless that price drops significantly, which is again why they're looking at other options. We've heard links with Mateta at Crystal Palace, not a player I'm told that Palace want to let go, and now it looks like they've got European football unless UEFA decide otherwise after the Nottingham Forest complaint about a breach of multi-club rules. So we're going to have to be patient because Manchester United's main focus now is not actually on that number 9. It's on Mbeumo and can they get it over the line. Then it's on closing the financial year. Then it's on outgoings to fund the number 9. And that's when we're really going to see them move. So I sense, unless another club forces Manchester United's hand to bid earlier, that this pursuit of a striker might come after we know what Rasmus Højlund is doing, might come after we know where Marcus Rashford is potentially going, might come after we see whether Betis can sign Anthony permanently. It might come after a big one, whether Garnacho can bring in pure profit, and then we may see a big bid for a number 9, and there are still several names on the list.
Is Rasmus Højlund probably thinking that his time is up at Manchester United?
I don't think he's thinking in those terms. He'd like to fight for his place, but obviously he'll be aware that Manchester United are seeking a new 9, and in the end an exit may simply suit all parties. I think it more likely it will be a loan, possibly with an option or an obligation, because if Manchester United sell Rasmus Højlund, it's a book loss. And if they make a book loss off Højlund, then in many ways it's counterproductive, because they also have to factor in their PSR position too. So Højlund isn't going to be easy to ship off. There is clear and firm interest in Serie A, the same for Darwin Núñez as well, who's also being pursued by Atletico Madrid. So there's a little bit of overlap here, where in the same way the Premier League clubs are all looking at Šeško, Gyökeres, some say Osimhen, which has suddenly become a more open race. A lot of Italian teams, Napoli, for example, they are looking at Núñez and Højlund simultaneously. Milan want to bring in an important number 9 if they can too. So the true picture of where the number 9s are going to go will be clearer after we see the domino effect, when one club moves first. And maybe that was Chelsea with Delap, but they still could bring in another forward. So it's not as clear cut there. But once either an Arsenal, a Manchester United or a Liverpool, a Milan or a Napoli get that first name, then we'll start to see the full domino effect. And remember, these European clubs, they're operating from July onwards. So the 16th of June British window opening, again, skews the market and creates this sense of urgency. And why is nothing happening? And why have we got no update? But it's really a July onwards type situation, I think, for this mad movement of strikers. And with Rasmus Højlund, if Manchester United tell him that he's too far down the pecking order, then he may be prepared to go somewhere, likely on loan. And Italy is probably the most likely destination. With Xerxes, my understanding is that actually Ruben Amorim really values him and believes he's a bit more versatile and can play in more than one position in this system. But the irony is that if you wanted a permanent sale, it might be easier if we're only talking about benefit to the books rather than football terms. It could be simpler to sell Xerxes than Højlund, due to the fact that Manchester United paid such an astronomical number for Højlund with that so-called Manchester United tax that it will be a book loss. And just bringing in the money doesn't help if it is a book loss as far as PSR is concerned. So it won't be easy to sell Højlund permanently, and we'll have to wait and see what the valuation is of the suitors and what kind of structure Manchester United are prepared to entertain. But there's certainly a concrete possibility, regardless of the player position, that Manchester United tell Højlund they think it's in his best interest that he does go out somewhere. And then we just have to understand whether that's a new striker in, Højlund out on loan, a chance to maybe impress, or whether his time at Manchester United is up.
Ben, thank you very much for joining the window. Go get yourself a Philly cheesesteak. You deserved it.
Cheers, I'm off now. Philly cheesesteak for breakfast.
To keep up to date with the window, please make sure you subscribe to the talkSPORT YouTube channel just down below.